Now that more automakers are adding electric vehicle to their lineups, what would the competition between old and new EV players look like?
Even 4 or 5 years ago, when I was visiting car manufacturers in Europe and in the US with my students, it was clear that even then they were all targeting to be able to produce EVs. I think every major auto company 5 years ago, even longer back than that, had decided that this is a market they have to be in. Now, it's become even more dramatic, and some of them are saying they will move out of internal combustion completely in a certain number of years. So I think that's almost a foregone conclusion that I think the entire industry is going to move primarily to EVs. I think it's a fundamental change. We see it happening in the US. I know in China it's happened. So I think it's kind of inevitable from my perspective. So what that means is major restructuring. You have new players like Tesla who are disrupting. You have old players like GM redesigning themselves. A lot of upheaval, a lot of restructuring. What's the Chinese proverb? We're dealing here with different philosophies of how to build a car and how to driving experience. I think one of the things that we've seen, the difference between Tesla and, let's say, the traditional auto manufacturers is, from my perspective, Tesla comes at it more like a computer company. The electric car, the driving experience is more like using your computer, and the way they've structured their supply chain, connections with suppliers, the way in which they develop software and they download it, and they have their own programmers, so they're less dependent on the chip shortage. That's one thing we've seen, that by being able to rewrite the code that's used in some of the chips that go into the car modules, they have more flexibility and they pool resources and switch from one design to another, whereas the traditional car manufacturers are outsourcing these things with computers and they don't have much control over it. So these are fundamental changes, and a lot of the car companies are starting to hire software engineers and starting to learn how to write their own code. So we're seeing those kind of changes.
What advantages and disadvantages do you think traditional and new car makers have respectively in the EV market?
A lot of it has to do with what percentage of their output will be EV versus traditional, right? So if you have a company like Tesla, it's 100% EV. If you have the others, they have a mix. First of all, you look at an electric vehicle, it has fewer parts. It's easier to produce, to manufacture, to assemble. It's a lot easier to maintain. There aren't that many moving parts. There aren't that many things in it. And so it's a far simpler technology in many ways. And so there are advantages inherent in the technology. It may be cheaper. I don't know. It depends on the power of the cost of electricity that goes into it. Right now, it's cheaper than gasoline by a lot. But basically, you're dealing with a very different technology. You're dealing with a very different structure of the supply chain, different relationships with suppliers. If you view yourself as a technology company, as opposed to assembling a car, traditional manufacturer, I think there are some fundamental differences. You modify designs perhaps more quickly, can be more innovative, I suppose, things of that sort.